The sun rose gently over the hills of Judah, spilling gold across the wilderness. It was a quiet morning, but for David, the peace of dawn was never complete. He lived in the wilderness now, a man between promises, hunted by a jealous king, yet chosen by God. Around him, the hum of his men filled the camp. They were loyal warriors, hardened by hunger and danger, yet their hearts beat with faith in the one they followed. David often looked across the desert and thought of what life used to be. Once he played his harp for Saul. Once he was the hero who slew Goliath. But now he was a fugitive. Still, even in exile, he kept his honor. When others would steal to survive, David protected the shepherds of the land. He watched over them as if they were his own, believing that righteousness, even in hiding, was still strength before God. In those same hills lived a man named Nabal, a wealthy herdsman from the house of Caleb. His flocks filled the valleys of Carmel, and his barns overflowed with grain. But though he was rich, his soul was poor. Nabal's servants feared him, for he was harsh and selfish, a man who valued gold more than goodness. Yet, in the same house lived a woman unlike him in every way. Her name was Abigail, and she was known throughout the region for her beauty, her grace, and the wisdom that shone brighter than her appearance. Abigail had married Nabal in obedience, not desire. She was a woman of peace joined to a man of pride. Many nights she prayed in silence, whispering to God for patience, asking for the strength to do right in a household ruled by folly. She saw the cruelty in her husband's eyes and learned to respond with calm, because she believed that gentleness could sometimes silence evil better than anger. It was shearing time, a season of harvest and festivity. Nabal prepared a great feast for his men, the kind of celebration that echoed through the hills. It was a day of laughter for everyone except the servants who feared his temper. Far away in the wilderness of Paran, word reached David that Nabal was shearing his sheep. David remembered the time his men had guarded Nabal's shepherds. Not once had they harmed them. Not once had they taken a lamb or a loaf of bread. His men had acted honorably, and now it was time to ask for kindness in return. David called 10 of his young men and said, "Go up to Carmel, greet Nabal in my name, tell him, peace be to you and to your house. Tell him we watched over his flocks and took nothing. Ask him, please, if he will share something with us, for it is a day of goodwill." The men went as David commanded. They found Nabal among his feasting guests, drunk with pride and wine. When they spoke David's name, Nabal's face twisted with contempt. "Who is David?" he sneered. "And who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who break away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my meat and give it to men I do not know?" His words burned with arrogance, and his laughter echoed in mockery. David's messengers stood silent, then turned and left, hearts heavy with insult. They returned to the camp and told David everything. The air around David grew still. The insult was not only to him, but to everything he stood for. For months, he had lived with restraint, refusing to lift his hand against Saul, trusting God to defend him. But this time, the anger rose like fire in his chest. "Every man gird on his sword," he said, his voice steady but fierce. "By morning, there will not be one man left in Nabal's household." 400 men prepared their weapons. Their steps echoed with fury as they followed David toward Carmel. But somewhere between his wrath and Nabal's house, God was already writing a different ending. A servant ran to Abigail, breathless with fear. "My lady," he said, "David sent messengers to greet our master, but he railed at them. Those men were good to us in the fields. We lost nothing while they were near. They were like a wall around us, protecting us day and night. Now evil is determined against our house, for David will not let this go unpunished. You must act quickly, for no one can reason with Nabal." Abigail's heart trembled, but her mind was clear. She had lived long enough beside Nabal to understand the danger of his folly. Without delay, she ordered her servants to prepare gifts: 200 loaves of bread, 5 sheep already dressed, 5 measures of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs. She loaded them on donkeys and said to her men, "Go on ahead of me, I will follow you." She told nothing to Nabal. Some truths were better kept from a fool. The road to the wilderness was rough, winding through hills and shadowed paths. Abigail rode quickly, her heart pounding as she imagined what awaited. She prayed as she rode, asking the Lord to turn David's anger, to give her words that would touch his heart. Ahead she saw them, David and his men descending from the mountain, swords drawn, faces stern. Dust rose around them like smoke. David's eyes were fixed, his expression hardened by betrayal. Abigail dismounted quickly. She fell to her knees before him, bowing low until her face touched the earth. The men around her froze. No one had ever approached David like this. "My lord," she said softly, her voice trembling yet firm, "let this guilt be on me alone. Please allow your servant to speak to you." David paused. Her humility disarmed him. He looked down at her, this woman who had risked everything to stop bloodshed, and his anger began to falter. "Pay no attention to Nabal, my lord," she continued. "He is a fool, as his name means. I did not see the men you sent. But now the Lord has kept you from shedding blood. Let this offering be for your young men. Please forgive the offense of your servant. The Lord will surely make you a lasting house, for you fight his battles, and he will deliver you from evil." Her words were like water poured on fire. She spoke not only with wisdom, but with faith, seeing in David what few others did, the man chosen by God, the future king of Israel. As she spoke, David's hand dropped from his sword. His heart softened. The fury that had blinded him faded into awe. He looked at Abigail, this woman of beauty and discernment, and saw more than a messenger. He saw grace. "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel," David said, "who sent you this day to meet me. Blessed be your wisdom, and blessed are you, for you have kept me from bloodshed. Had you not come quickly, by morning not one man in Nabal's house would have lived." He accepted her gifts and said, "Go home in peace. I have listened to your voice and granted your request." Relief washed over Abigail. She bowed again and returned to her household, her heart thankful that God had turned destruction into mercy. When she reached home, Nabal was feasting like a king. The tables overflowed with food, and the wine had made him senseless. She said nothing until morning. When the sun rose and his mind cleared, she told him everything that had happened, the insult, the danger, and how she had intervened. Nabal's face went pale, his body stiffened as if struck by fear itself. His heart failed within him, and he became as stone. 10 days later, the Lord struck him, and Nabal died. When word reached David, he lifted his eyes to heaven and said, "Blessed be the Lord who has defended my cause and kept me from doing evil. The Lord has returned Nabal's wickedness upon his own head." But David could not forget the woman who had saved him from sin. Her wisdom had turned his wrath into gratitude, and her faith had left a mark upon his soul. He sent messengers to Carmel with a message that would change her life. They came to Abigail and said, "David has sent us to ask you to become his wife." Abigail stood silent for a moment. She had lost her husband, but she had not lost her peace. She thought of David, the man she had met on the road, the warrior whose anger had turned to gentleness, the anointed one who would one day rule Israel. Her heart stirred with both humility and hope. She bowed low and said, "Here is your servant, ready to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord." Without delay, she gathered her 5 maidens, mounted her donkey, and followed the messengers. Her heart beat with both reverence and wonder. She was leaving behind sorrow for a new beginning, a future shaped not by fear, but by faith. When she came before David again, it was not as a peacemaker, but as a bride. He looked upon her and saw in her the same calm strength that had once stopped his anger. Her presence brought him peace, her words reminded him of God's mercy, and her grace taught him that true beauty was not in appearance alone, but in the heart that listens to God. Their union was not built on the fleeting charm of passion, but on the quiet bond of respect and destiny. David had known women of beauty, but Abigail was a woman of wisdom, the kind who steadied a man's soul. In the days that followed, she walked beside him through the hardships of exile. She saw his courage in battle and his restraint before Saul. She watched him lead men not by pride, but by purpose. And when doubt tried to cloud his path, she reminded him of the words she had once spoken on that fateful road, that God would make his house endure forever. David would often remember the moment he first saw her kneeling in the dust, her voice calm, her heart strong. In her, He had seen what true love looks like, not the love that flatters, but the love that saves. And Abigail, though once bound to a fool, found her purpose in the heart of a man after God's own heart. She became a symbol of grace under pressure, of wisdom that brings peace, and of faith that transforms anger into compassion. In time, songs would be sung of David's victories, and his name would echo through generations. But among those who truly knew him, the story of Abigail would always be remembered, not as a tale of war, but as a love story written by divine hands. For it was her courage that turned wrath to mercy, her faith that guided a king, and her grace that captured his heart. And so, in the wilderness where rage once threatened to destroy, God planted something tender. A meeting born from conflict became a union marked by peace. In Abigail's eyes, David found a reflection of God's wisdom. In her words, he heard the call to be better. Their love was not born from passion alone, but from divine timing, from the quiet realization that sometimes God sends certain souls not only to walk with us, but to save us from ourselves. And through the years, whenever David lifted his harp to sing, the melody of her wisdom would find its way into his music. For love like that does not fade, it becomes part of the story God himself writes. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment what moral lesson you got from this story. God bless you.